everyone, this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com and welcome to PGN Archery. Today I'm going to show you a couple of archery tips and facts about the sport and how to get better at it and what you could expect when coming over to PGN Archery. First of all, if you've never shot a bow and arrow before, what I would recommend is getting a little rubber band like this. Tie it in a knot close to the end, get it secure, and then just practice. Find your dominant hand, which in my case is my right, and hold the knot in the middle with your left hand, which is the hand that you would use to hold your bow. Rotate it outwards, grab it, pull back, and let go. A couple of things you'll notice is, one, this does create a slap against your wrist, which is why a wrist guard is important for archery, unless if you enjoy getting hit at constantly on the wrist, which I imagine you don't. Secondly, there's proper technique and form, but I'll get into that in just a moment. But how you release it is very important. In archery, you don't think of letting go like this. No, you actually have to let this slip out. And this is the easiest way to let it slip out is by using a rubber band. Very simple. So when you pull, if you look at my fingers right here, it's just going to slip. We use 3 fingers in archery. You may have something different, but typically 3. And you have 1 above the nock and 2 below. There is no nock on this. Nock is that little point that is where the arrow connects on the string. But you pull, find your anchor point, which in this case is my chin, and just let it slip out. So now one thing that I said was arm guard. This is an arm guard. You would put it on your non-dominant arm. Remember, in archery, if you're a right-handed archer, you're holding the bow with your left arm. You're pulling back with your right. There are some bows that are on the ambidextrous side. Some are intended to be just that. Now you might notice, okay, that slap's not going to hit my wrist anymore. I'm protected. Next up, the string, depending on your bow, may start to dig into your fingers after a while. So that's why a finger tab is useful. You see the finger tab right here, it's gonna go around my ring finger, and then these 2 fingers are gonna rest on this bottom part, like I mentioned earlier, and this part on top. And that's so that it could go above and below the nock. Put my fingers around, pull back, and this allows you to slip off while not feeling that draw weight against your fingers. Now, the string is not going to dictate the draw weight. It's actually going to be the limbs. Let me show you that real quick. This is one bow that we have at PGN Archery. You may notice the color scheme being of the Paul Gale Network logo. No coincidence there. This is a right-handed bow, which I'm holding with my left arm. When I'm holding it out in this position, you see this knocking point right here. The arrow is going to go right beneath that. You may find some strings where there are 2 and the arrow would fit right between. If you ever find a bow like this one with just 1, it always goes below. So I'm going to imagine, I'm going to show you right here, that my finger is going to go above and below this point. I'm going to get my stance, I'm going to aim, I'm going to pull back. Now, I'm not going to dry fire. Dry firing, not only is it dangerous to you, dry firing is when you pull a bowstring back, by the way, without an arrow in it. Not only is it dangerous to you, but it's damaging to the bow. And you may ask yourself, well, why? The bow can obviously handle an arrow being shot out of it. What's the difference? Dissipation of energy. When the string is pulled back, it has an arrow in it, in the bow, to fly out. So the energy travels through the arrow and goes out. When it doesn't, you have reverb and you have this string putting its energy back into the bow without anywhere else to go. And a few shots of that and you could actually damage your limbs, and there's your bow. So that's unfortunate. You don't want that to happen. Okay, a couple of small facts about the bow. This is, by the way, a recurve bow. Recurve bow, it bends in and then outwards. This is the front face as it faces you. This is the outward face. The front, it comes to you, and then the concave part goes out and away. This is another recurve bow, but it's of a long bow stature, and this one's actually ambidextrous. You can see it's smaller, but it still works just fine for adults. I'm 5'11.5". That bow right there is 66 inches, which is 5 feet and 6 inches tall. This one is clearly shorter. But once again, you'd pull back and you would let go. This one's grip is equal. And this one also conveniently has a built-in finger tab. It's nice and rubbery right here, so it's soft for when you release from your fingertips. Also, you'd put the arrow underneath here in this case. The beauty of having a couple of different bows is the different type of tradition that comes with them. With this type of bow, your traditional recurve, I'm holding it with my left hand, which is my proper hand right now, you see the riser is bent in and out, and that's so that the arrow is directly behind where it's going to go, correct? In this type of bow, it's more similar to a Mongolian bow, where the archer can use his or her arrow on either side. Now, this is a long lost part of the sport of archery, because archery isn't used anymore, bow and arrows I should say, aren't used anymore for weapons, for combat. These days it's used as a sport. Stationary, stand still. You see it at the Olympics, archer lines up his or her shot, fires, goes down the course, 210 feet away, whatever it is. And you place the arrows in modern archery on the inside medial portion of your holding arm. So you have the arrow, you have it on this case on my inner left, and I pull back and I let go. Back in the day when archery was used as a weapon, and I say archery, but really the use of bow and arrow as a weapon is, this is too slow. You want to put it on the outside. So you would have your arrow, rather than place it here, knock it, pull back and fire, which takes too much time. It's not effective for speedy. If you were in person of combat, it makes more sense to go lateral, correct? Outside. That's how it would be. That's the benefit of this kind of bow, is that you could go to the outside and see what it's like. Now you might notice that the riser is actually dead on in the middle. So we have the string right here, and the string is right in the middle of the riser. It's not indented like the other one, like the other recurve one. So it's kind of a combination of a recurve, long bow stature, but really a Mongolian bow when it comes to how it's designed. And I actually like this one quite a bit, because even though you can use the right-handed bow with your left hand and right-handed bow with your right hand, which might feel a little bit different. Like I said, it does feel a little bit different. That grip is intended for your left hand, but I have shot it with both and it feels just fine, to be honest. The only difference is you are now using a left-handed bow with the sight on the lateral side, in which typically on a recurve bow, it's on the medial side. Here though, check it out. It's now a left-handed bow. It's a right-handed bow. I could put the arrow on the medial or lateral side, depending on whether I'm using it with my right or left hand. So that's a lot to digest right now, and it might not be received the best when it comes to video formatting, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a backstory on the different types of bows, at least that we have. And you also have your compound bows. Those use wheels and cams that help the archer pull back. It doesn't have as much force, as much draw weight. Draw weight is dependent on the limbs in the bow, how difficult it is to pull back. The harder it is to pull back, the more energy that the bow is capable of producing, the faster, the farther the arrow is going to be. You have certain bows of the compound variety that are as easy to pull for the entire time. So let's say you have a 30-pound draw weight bow. In this case, in the recurve bow, which is not 30 pounds, by the way. This is a 36-pound bow. Not the weight. No, the weight's not weight. The weight's not 36 pounds of the bow, but the amount of force that's required to pull back is the equivalent of 36 pounds. Right here, this is easy. The farther you pull back, the harder it is to pull back. In a compound bow, it's the same smooth process the whole way through because the wheel and the cam, they work for you. Now that's not traditional archery. That's not what they used hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. So what we have here are these types, but all types of bows are welcome here. There's also traditional longbows and crossbows, although when you get into the crossbow territory, some states view that as a weapon and not as a sport, whereas these types of bows are these days recognized full-on as sports. You might notice that I also have a whistle around my neck. Whistle is typically used on a field to instruct archers what point of the day they are at, what point of the routine they are at. If you hear two whistles from your lead instructor, that is going to your position, your firing line. This is where people can get ready. If you hear one whistle, you may begin firing. When you hear three whistles, that whistle came out a little bit different in terms of the sound, you may go to the line to retrieve your arrows, and it is understood by all archers that at that point nobody is at the firing line, everybody is just at the retrieval point, and that's the target line, which is 5 feet away from your targets. If you hear 5 whistles or more in rapid succession, that is cause for concern. Everybody off the field immediately. There's some type of an emergency, somebody got hurt, somebody misfired, what have you, but we hope that that never happens. A couple of other points that are important for first-time archers is finding your dominant eye. Your dominant eye and your dominant arm might not always be the same, but there are a couple of different ways. One is the point at the instructor method, in which you would point at me, and the eye that I see your finger behind is the eye that is your dominant. The other one is an aperture method, which is you point at me and the eye that I see through your triangle is the eye that's dominant. Another point is point at something in the distance, and this could be something far away. I'm looking at a fig right now. I'm pointing at it, and then the eye that, if I close it with one eye or the other, my finger's going to shift accordingly. An instructor may use any one of these methods to determine his or her student's dominant eye, but usually by an adult you kind of understand which one is your dominant, but you might not, especially if you've never really fired a firearm before or shot a bow and arrow before, then this might be something new to you. I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of shots. There are a couple of different approaches that I like when it comes to archery. First of all, and you might notice here, at the range right now, there are no targets. I feel that for introductory students, it's good to not have a target present, as just the art and the feeling of shooting a bow and arrow is very satisfying in itself. But as soon as you associate a letter grade with it, it brings you back, it brings a lot of people back to school, getting an A, B, C, or D, and it could be kind of discouraging. So even though you have a target this space and you're firing and you're aiming just fine, so you think, and you're landing everywhere else, you might even have a nice cluster, but your aiming is just off. It should be here, but the nice cluster is here. You may feel discouraged because here you are thinking you're doing a good job, you're following the rules of the range just well, and all of your shots are off the target, and it could be discouraging. Whereas if you see everything hitting the hay in this case, which is a nice amount of surface area, at least you feel confident and good going in. Then we eventually put targets, then we eventually put, balloons or powder or water balloons, something like that on it, or just proper traditional 10-point pieces of target paper and what have you. So in the beginning, no targets are necessary. I'm going to go ahead and fire off a couple of shots and show you what to expect. Now, the couple of different approaches that I have is one, shoot safely, shoot in succession, and have fun. get in your repetitions. Right here I have 10 arrows present. I don't know if I'm going to show off all 10 shots in this performance, but I'm going to show off a few. The other thought that I have is limit the arrows to 3. What I find, when you give an archer 3 arrows, he or she is going to value those shots per end. An end is the equivalent of an inning or a round, you know, in archery, an end. So if you only have 3 arrows, you're going to value those shots. 1, reset, 2, reset, 3, and you're not going to just willy-nilly just fire them all off. You know, you're going to really concentrate, and that's going to be your time to go back and retrieve the arrows, observe your shot, etc. But like I said, 2 different points of thought. I'm about to shoot, so I need the range to be clear. I'm going to get my finger tab, which I left over here. I'm going to show you a couple of things. So 1, safety. 2, this is where it goes off. Safety is always number 1, but 2 is multiple shots to get in your repetitions, because that's valuable. Or the other one, starting off with safety as well, but instead this time following protocol, valuing the shots. So yeah, there's a combination. There's a couple of different thought processes in there, but I'm gonna start off with the larger 66-inch recurve bow. Finding out that the arrow is right for me. How do you find out an arrow is right for you? If you put the arrow to your chest and you extend your fingers outward, the tip of the arrow should be farther than the tip of your fingers. If not, you risk the possibility of, when pulling back your arrow at maximum level, it slips off, you let go, shoot yourself through your own thumb. That'd be bad. I'll try another arrow. This one's smaller, but is it still longer than my chest? Barely. I wouldn't want to go personally any lower than this, because at my maximum draw, you know, if I'm exaggerating here, but if I'm curling in, if this was not me curling in and my fingers were overlapping the arrow's tip, which is not in this case. In this case, you know, here's where I am. Like I said, I was exaggerating. But if I wasn't, and this was what it looked like right here, this arrow would not be suitable for me. This would be better for somebody shorter than 5'11" and a half, and with not as large of a wingspan, which when curved around, their chest cavity to fingertip isn't as long as mine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the longer arrows though. And I'm going to show you first the proper way, step by step, that if you follow this process, you're going to become a good archer. And this is that second approach of that disciplined approach. First is my stance. My stance, I want shoulder width apart. I'm right leg dominant, right foot dominant, right eye dominant. So in this case, I'm going to use my bow in my left hand. My right foot's going to be back. My left foot's going to be forward. I have my stance. Okay. The hook process. I'm putting my arrow in its slot, and I am knocking it right beneath that little brass ring that I pointed out earlier. That's the hook. Okay? The hook and grip. I have my grip. You may hold on like this. I'm safe right now, so I could show you. There's nobody over there, otherwise I wouldn't be pointing at somebody or at the camera. This is a traditional grip. This is actually another grip where you're very gently holding the bow, and this is so that you don't kind of pull the bow and rotate it outwards. You're holding it gently, your 3 fingers are curling on, and you're really just holding it with your right thumb, well, your left thumb in this case, and your pointing finger, just kind of chilling there, and that's what you would do. I'm going to go for the traditional grip, as I know not to pronate, not to curl my bow in. So, to go over again, we got our stance, knocked it, hook and grip on check, my posture alignment, am I standing up straight? Good, that's step number 4. Okay, raised bow. From this downwards position, downwards is always safe. You're not going to hit anything in the sky, you're not going to hit anything out in front of you. Raised bow, Now I'm going to draw. Draw is pull back. Anchor, I'm going to do in succession. The draw and anchor. I'm drawing back to my chin. I'm going to anchor this on my chin. Transfer to hold. The energy is now in my back. Release. I aimed and I released. Follow through. Feedback. I'm looking. I'm going to see if I could replicate that shot right there. Grab another arrow. Place the arrow in. After I got my stance, which is already set up. So we've got stance, knock, hook and grip, posture alignment, raised bow, draw, anchor, transfer to hold using my back muscles, aim, release and follow through. You can see my cluster is right on. That's within 5 inches apart. I'm gonna do it again. It's very important always to provide feedback. I'm giving myself slightly less feedback as I'm talking to you, but here I'll do it again. I'll go for a third one since 3 is sometimes my recommended. As you can see, I have my finger tab on here. My stance is checked, shoulder width apart, my left leg is forward. I've got my hook, good. My grip's ready. It's knocked. Raise the bow. Draw. Anchor. Transfer to hold, put it in my muscles. Aim. And I fired. Another great shot. Great targeting right there. So when I say transfer to hold and aim, transfer to hold is using your rear deltoid muscles to lock it in. If you are only using your arm, or even if you're strong, your arm will eventually get fatigued. If you could get the feeling of once you're in position, and now that you're in position, after your posture is checked and everything is good, you're there, you could bring the energy and put it into your back muscles so that you could hold it harder, longer, give your shot more energy, more power. After you've transferred to hold, then you aim, then you release and follow through with it. Don't move last second, just like in basketball, you might be more familiar with that. You don't just release and move real quickly. You follow through. You get that shot in. That's so that as the ball is leaving your fingertips, it's going directly where you want it. As I released, I'm following through. I'm not just shaking the bow. It's going exactly where I wanted it to be. And then the feedback is providing feedback where each time I gave myself a little bit of feedback, like, okay, was I aiming a little bit off to the side? Did I have some weird cluster? No, all 3 of my shots, if you could see right here, hopefully the camera is able to capture this. I've got arrow 1, arrow 2, arrow 3, and all 3 seem to be within a 4-inch small cluster apart. Yeah, it looks like you can see them. So that's a good clustering. Now, if I had a target up, the target would show, okay, are all 3 right in the yellow? Or are all 3 right around the yellow? Or are all 3 way off to the side and I totally missed the target, but the cluster was good? You see, and then the cluster is what's important because everything else comes from there. If you're shooting off to the right or off to the left or a little bit high or a little bit low, you adjust your stance. That's the kind of stuff that you could do, in post. Later on in feedback, so that for your next 3 shots or whatever, you provide yourself that feedback. Oh, I'm shooting off to the right. I need to move my bow a little bit to the left, and then just follow through. Because if your cluster is accurate, that's the most important thing. That's the beautiful part. I won't go ahead and show too many more shots, but the next approach is standing still at your firing line, just grabbing your arrows and having fun, still being safe, still one person at a time, still one shot at a time, but getting in the reps. Throw 10 arrows, in your quiver, ground quiver, which is what we have, or back quiver, which is possible, like Link from The Legend of Zelda. Getting in multiple succession, multiple reps. You don't value your shots as much, but on the other hand, you're getting in a lot of repetition, which is also valuable. So there's different trains of thought. I'm a believer in both. Proper stance work, that should always happen, but just getting into multiple shots, sometimes that's also fun. This is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com signing out. Thank you for watching PGN Archery with me, and I look forward to seeing you in person. Bye.